Welcome to Podcast 83, a regular look at the news, stories, and trends related to Michigan's 83 counties from the Michigan Association of Counties.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Podcast 83, the podcast put on by the Michigan Association of Counties. My name is Stephan Currie, the Executive Director of MAC, and today we are joined by Enbridge, the Manager of Community Engagement, Paul Meneghini. Paul, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Enbridge has been a long partner of MAC, so we're excited to have him here today. Paul, why don't you start us off? Why don't you tell us a little bit about Enbridge? You know, there's obviously things about Enbridge that first come to mind for people, but let's start with a broader view before we get into the specifics of maybe some of the issue areas we want to talk about.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Steve. We are quite a large company. We are essentially an energy transportation company. So we have, I'll say, four different asset buckets that I like to describe our company to folks. Obviously, we're most known for in Michigan is our crude oil or our liquids transportation system. Obviously, Line 5 is very well known in the state, but we do also operate three other liquids pipelines in the southern part of the state. So again, it's our liquids transportation. That's probably a network of over 30,000 miles of pipelines across North America. Our second asset bucket is gas transmission. We have large interstate natural gas transmission pipelines, mostly from the Gulf up the eastern seaboard. So if you live in probably most of New York or Philadelphia or Pennsylvania areas, you probably get your gas is transported by an Enbridge pipeline and then fed obviously to your local utilities. We also have a utility business. If you live in certain parts of Ohio, North Carolina, Utah, the greater Toronto area, you pay your residential gas bill to Enbridge. So we have a quite large utility business, which currently serves over, I believe it's 7 million customers and growing. And then the fourth and probably the most growing part of our energy transportation portfolio is our green energy production. We have about 45 to 50 utility scale wind and solar projects across North America and even some offshore assets in Europe. So again, we're diversified. We're an energy transportation company in like 5 countries. I think we're in about 42 of our 50 states here in the U.S. So quite a broad energy transportation footprint.
Yeah, and how did those within the energy transportation world, like how do those affect Michigan? Are all those areas feeding energy into Michigan, or certain ones? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'll start with the natural gas side. We operate the Vector pipeline, which is a large interstate natural gas pipeline, which essentially starts in the northeast corner of the Chicagoland area, if you will, and then goes around the south end of the lake and goes across, follows I-94 plus or minus across the state. But there's many takeoffs along that corridor where, again, that natural gas is purchased by local distribution companies and brought to your door. So there's the Vector pipeline, which definitely serves much of the southern Michigan market. And then also the Nexus pipeline, which comes in from Ohio into the southeast part of the state and feeds some assets there in Michigan. Obviously, most known in Michigan is our crude oil transportation network, which consists of Line 5 and then Line 78, which again generally follows that Vector pipeline down in the southern part of the state, but also what we refer to as Line 79, which breaks off from our terminal near Stockbridge in Ingham County, and then goes down and feeds two of the refineries down in the Toledo, Ohio market. So as an example, just again, focusing on our crude oil transportation system, we produce a little bit of crude oil in Michigan. I'm actually joining you today from Escanaba, Michigan. I'm a Delta County resident up in the UP. We do produce a few barrels. I think it's like 12 to 14,000 barrels of crude oil here in Michigan. A lot of that crude oil is actually delivered by Line 5. A third-party collection pipeline gathers a lot of that crude oil and injects it into Line 5 near Lewiston, Michigan. And then that product is brought down further to market. So again, it's gathering about 80% of Michigan's produced crude oil, transferring it to market. That takes a lot of trucks off of the roads in rural parts of the northern lower. And then really, we only have one refinery here in Michigan. It only produces about 150,000 barrels a day of refined products, and Michigan consumes about 450,000, right? So we do have a net deficit of obviously production in the states. We rely on our state and our other neighbors, if you will, whether it be Canada or maybe out in North Dakota, some of the crude oil in our system comes from, to be brought into Michigan. We can only refine or meet our needs of about a third of our capacity here in Michigan. So the other 2/3 is, again, refined in neighboring states and then flows back into Michigan to meet our daily needs. And that's just on the transportation end of it. But also, as we know, there's a lot of petroleum petrochemicals that are used in Michigan's great manufacturing environment that we have, whether it be naphthas or ethylenes. I mean, pretty much anything today is made out of some form of petroleum derivative. So again, it's just not that those transportation fuels, I think, that we most connect with, that to fill up our tanks and our tractors in our fields and our airplanes or jet fuel, whatever it may be. But really, it does also fuel Michigan from a manufacturing perspective with all the byproducts from the petrochemical industry.
Yeah, and before we get in, I want to talk to you a little bit about the significant ice storms that we've had in the spring here in Michigan. But before we get to that, with all these different transportation networks, can you talk a little bit about what Enbridge is doing on the safety side of things to make sure things are safe for Michigan residents?
Yeah, good question, Steve. And I think really that's where it starts, right? Is safety. We have to have safe assets in order to continue to operate our systems. And it really all starts at safety. Again, I'll focus on our liquid side of the business, but we are regulated by acronym Petroleum Hazardous Material Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration, PHMSA, which essentially is the DOT for pipelines, right? Because we are an interstate system, we're not solely operating in intrastate. In Michigan, it's an interstate system. So again, we have a very rigorous regulatory programs, heavily inspected and audited by the federal government, if you will, at PHMSA, to make sure our pipelines are safe. And we do that. The technology today is incredible, even compared to where we were 20 or 40 years ago, with all these, we call them tools or pigs, that run through the pipeline and literally inspect the pipeline from the inside out, right? So different tools look for corrosion in the pipeline, different tools look for cracks that might be developing near a well. So we have more data and more inspection and knowledge, if you will, of the integrity, is the word we like to use, of our pipelines, and really we ever have. Again, due to the technology and almost these MRI type grade instruments, to have that inside out inspection on our pipelines. So again, that's just maybe a touch on some of the how we know our pipelines are safe and continue to monitor them over time.
Yeah, and as we get into, you mentioned a lot about technology, and one thing folks I think hear about on the electric side is the use of AI and that demand on the electrical grid. What is your guys' role in the reliability space for energy, whether it be, you talked about the deficit of oil in Michigan that we use versus what we can produce. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing in the reliability area?
Yeah, no, thank you. Well, I think even unfortunately, it maybe played out a little bit here in the northern lower just a couple, 2.5 weeks ago with the significant ice storms. And here we are, I think 2.5 weeks out of that, and there's still folks without power in some rural areas of our state. There even was an energy emergency, I know, put on by the governor to relax trucker hours, right, to get fuel up to the gas stations in the northern lower, because there were stations that were running out of fuel. There were people that couldn't get fuel for their generators, for their backup power systems at their homes to keep their freezers going or their heater on or whatever it may be. So I think it really gets into, if our system, again, one of a very integrated system of energy, but if any of those pillars, if you will, fall down, whether it be our electrical grid in the case of the ice storms, or whether it be just the transportation fuels that we all just rely on to live our lives, if one of those pillars falls away, it certainly very quickly can turn into some very serious issues for people who live wherever we may live, right? So I just think it's making sure we're safe, that really drives the reliability component, that we're reliable. We continue to operate. We were down for a very short period of time, just with some power issues. Again, during the ice storms, we were able to get back up within, I think it was less than a day total. And again, to continue to feed those refineries so those products can be refined and then flow back up into our communities, to keep the lights on, to keep our houses warm in the winter, whether it be propane. A lot of what Line 5 delivers here in Michigan is over half of our propane. That's 300 million gallons of propane. So that's really the heat, right, for a lot of folks who live in the rural parts of our state.
Yeah, and then let's talk a little bit about cost and affordability. There's been a lot of talk recently about tariffs and energy tariffs from Canada and things like that. How has Enbridge been affected by that, and how is Enbridge keeping costs down for their customers?
Yeah, thanks. We don't believe that tariffs are whatever the tariffs may be. I believe they're put off again for another 90-day pause here a few weeks ago. Our North American energy system, and including the Enbridge transportation network, we are so integrated and across our northern border with Canada, right? The refineries that have the ability to get crude oil that transported on our system are very reliant on Canadian crude oil. There's different types of crude oil. Some are light, some are heavy. A lot of our refineries are used to the Canadian grade of crude oil here in the upper Midwest because they've had the availability to be connected to the Enbridge grid. And Canadian crude oil in general is generally discounted on the open market from, say, a light sweet crude oil that might come from Texas per se, or down in the southern part of the state. So our business, we don't see a huge impact from tariffs wherever they may fall. I guess I don't even want to speculate what the long-term viability of tariffs for energy from Canada may or may not be. But again, we really don't expect it to impact our business as much as maybe some other types of businesses out there.
Well, good. And so we talked a little bit, or you touched on a little bit on Line 5. The tunnel's been a hot topic. Can you give us any updates on where things stand with the tunnel and protecting that line?
Yeah, no, thanks, Steve. And really, the tunnel project is really to make a safe pipeline safer at the end of the day, right? Again, that pipeline is very, very heavily inspected, especially that 4-mile crossing in the bottom of the Straits of Mackinac. I think fair to say it's the most inspected segment of over 100,000 miles of pipelines that we own and operate here in North America. But that being said, we did enter into agreements with the state of Michigan back in 2018. Hard to believe it's been, 7 years ago already, to replace that underground or the underwater crossing at the Straits with a tunnel, right? To bore a concrete tunnel deep below the lake bed and then get those pipes off the bottom of the lake and installed within that tunnel. We've got some good momentum today. Again, we applied for essentially all of our permits, the 3 big ones anyway, back in the spring, April of 2025. So here we are 5 years later. We have received our Michigan Public Service Commission permit. So in other words, may we relocate that energy asset from the lake floor into the concrete line tunnel. That's even withstood a recent court challenge, an appellate court challenge at the state level. So again, great, good, positive. We have our permit from the Michigan Public Service Commission. Our other permit from the state is from Eagle. There's a very minimal amount of work on the North Shore and the South Shore, the upland areas, if you will, for the construction project itself, right, where the tunnel is going to enter on the south side of the Straits and pop out on the north side. So again, we did apply for that permit back in April of 2020. We did actually received it in February of 2021. But unfortunately, in very general condition for permits for work in water bodies and wetlands is a 5-year, the impacts or the work itself has to be started within 5 years. Well, because of the delays on the federal side, we didn't want to be in a scenario where we had our Eagle permit and the federal permit wouldn't come until 2026, and our Eagle permit isn't valid anymore, right? That 5-year window. So we just here earlier this year reapplied for our Eagle permit to do work in waterways or in wetlands, I should say. So I'm sure there'll be public comment opportunities for the public here probably this summer. They haven't come out with the schedule and what the engagement opportunities are for the public to engage with that. But again, hopefully that project, again, we received that permit in less than a year's time back in 2020, 2021. So we're expecting some pretty good progress, and hopefully as we get into the latter part of this year, we'll have our Eagle permits in hand and whatnot. The federal permit is the third one. It's led by the Corps of Engineers because it's a navigable water body crossing. The Corps is undergoing an EIS, an environmental impact statement on it. Again, we're 5 years in. There's obviously, if folks are following with some of President Trump's executive orders, issuing an energy emergency for our country. And actually just today, we're able to find out that the tunnel project, as it's being reviewed by the Corps, will be subject to some emergency procedures or processes that the Corps, again, just came out with yesterday. And then confirmed today that the tunnel project is on that list. So how that's going to play out to be seen, right? The Corps' expedite or processes to further these permits for energy projects is still a bit unclear, and we'll let that sort out. But again, we feel we have some really good forward momentum for that federal permit. The schedule that the Corps has had out there since the fall of 23 called for a draft EIS to be issued in the spring of 2026. So we're in April of 2026. So we do expect some type of a draft to be issued for public comment here in the very near future, and then a permit decision in early 2026. So I think we're pretty darn close with keeping on that path. Unfortunately, it would be about a 6-year process, assuming we get all of the permits here. But again, really good forward positive momentum, and looking forward to executing a project in the northern part of the state that really is going to just be a shot in the arm, right, for the communities in and around the Straits. It's going to be a huge opportunity, whether it be all the way back to tax dollars for our local townships up there due to a construction project of this value, to just the couple hundred people that are going to be there working on this project for upwards of 4 to 5 years. Really good shot in the arm to the communities there. A lot of indirect benefits, stays, lodging, food, things like that. So again, it's just going to be a great infrastructure project. When you look at the locks up in the Sioux and the great economic shot in the arm that it's provided up there in Chippewa County, we really feel the tunnel project is going to do the same for Mackinac and Emmett and Sheboygan counties on the south side there.
Yeah, and are there other ways you're engaging the local communities on any of your projects? You talked a little bit about the permitting and things like that are going on up there. Any other ways you're engaging communities?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And we have, I should have looked at the numbers a little bit more before our call here today, but we have pipeline assets, and it's well over 20 counties in the state. So we're probably in 25 to 30% of the counties in Michigan, and that's why we're so happy and supportive of MAC. It's just been a great resource for us to, again, get a pulse on what's going on in all the counties that we have pipeline assets in and what's important to them, and meet with so many county commissioners, whether it be at your conferences, your legislative receptions and whatnot. So thanks for the opportunity to be a partner with MAC here for, like you said, so many years. But really one of my favorite parts of my job at Enbridge is helping out with our community investment programs. We have numerous opportunities, grant funds available, if you will. So I really stress people to go on enbridge.com and look up community investment, or we call our program Fueling Futures, where there's opportunities, particularly the Safe Community Program is really open for first responder type organizations, fire, police, EMS type personnel, to apply for grants for various equipment needs, communication devices, things like that. So again, great opportunities there to give back to our communities. We also have a general community investment program again. So if it kind of meets some of our requirements, just a lot of give back opportunities to local nonprofits, to volunteer organizations, veterans organizations. Just yesterday here in Escanaba, I had just an awesome opportunity to participate. The Community Foundation of Delta County gives back as the Easter break is approaching, or Easter weekend is approaching. We were able to stuff over 150 different large bags of food for veterans. So we had over 150 veterans pull up, and we're able to say thank them for their service and hand them a ham and a turkey and a bunch of other fixings, if you will, for a great happy Easter dinner. So we had over a dozen of our employees there on site again, participating and getting all the food together, and then also some financial donations and time to make that really cool event happen here in Escanaba yesterday.
Yeah, that's great news. Well, once again, what is that program called? The investment
It's
program?
it's Fueling Futures, but again,
Fueling-
just go on the Enbridge website in the search bar and type in community investment or Fueling Futures, and you should be directed quite easily to the page. And there's of course an online application. But if anyone has any questions with that, please just reach out to the email address that's there, and we'll get you some support to walk you through the process if it to help you out.
Well, great funding opportunities are always great options for, especially first responders, because those sometimes those needs don't go fulfilled, but having an option through Enbridge is great. Is there anything else we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on today?
No, again, I just again wanted to say thanks to Mac. It's been a great sponsorship for us over the years, and a great way for us. We're so long and linear what we do, right? Transferring energy from one part of our state to another or across our state. It's just a great opportunity for us to go to attend your events and meet so many of our county commissioners in one spot. It really does help make our lives a lot more efficient, if you will, and cut down on some of our travel time from one part of our state to the other. So again, thank you for your help and partnership over the years.
No, we appreciate it, and we're happy to provide communication both ways, from our commissioners to Enbridge, Enbridge to our commissioners. We know there's sometimes issues that come up, and the best way to get the message out is to communicate, whether it be face to face or whatever the case may be. So making those connections is one of our roles here at the association. So thank you for your time today, Paul. We look forward to talking to you in the future, and thank you everyone for joining. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of Podcast 83.